Live in Nashville. We're here at the Bitcoin conference 2024. Not.
Yeah.
I'd like to be there.
Oops-a-daisy. Yeah.
Trump's speaking today. That's the big one. I love him or hate him. I kind of like him in ways. I know what he is, but at the same time, the very fact that he's going to be there and JFK has sort of RFK Jr.
Yeah.
RFK Jr. basically saying, putting the pressure on, hey, Trump, strategic reserve here, and people speculate.
Bitcoin, yeah.
Whatever Trump says about that, I can't imagine he may commit to that. And I know he just talking to the audience, whatever you got to say at the time in the moment.
Oh, yeah.
Not that he just lies, he plays to the audience. But then they get in the office. Who knows what happens after that? I mean, whatever. Of all the things you're doing,
whatever Epstein's banker wants, that's what he'll do.
Yeah, the AIPAC call or whatever. His relationship with Israel seems to have shifted a little more warmly, maybe. I don't know.
Shifted more warmly. He's been sucking their balls for his whole presidency.
I saw some, and this is probably just some anecdotal random video and who knows what, but that like when he was president and Netanyahu was at a thing with him and they're doing the photo sit down and they stand up and Netanyahu goes to shake his hand and Trump had to have seen it, right. And he just turned and walked away like, no, not with you right now.
Well, maybe. I mean, it's hard to say. He had to see it. Like, you know how people can be selective, all kinds of shit. So, I don't know. I think I saw that too.
And then more recently,
I don't think he'd snub the guy personally, but I don't know.
He plays those kind of things. I've seen him where, you know, whether it was, different politicians go to shake his hand and he's just kind of like, no.
Yeah.
Like, we're not hugging here.
Well, there was that thing where he like muscled his way to the front of the stage. That was a pretty funny clip. Like people were kind of grouping up in front of him. He's just like shoving people out of the way.
Where was that?
That was a few years ago.
Oh, okay.
That was during his first presidency. He was at some European meeting and like, you know, I think it was Chancellor Merkel, maybe it was the French president. I can't remember who it was, or maybe it was sort of a lesser political figure. But someone was standing in front of him, and he just, nope, not happening here. Just literally like.
I like that, and not that you should be rude, but I get tired of all the glad handing and like I think what people expect out of the presidency sometime is that just this perpetual diplomacy and just niceness, and despite everything, like you still present this front of like we're all buddies when there's clear issues going on. And so, like, through the Obama years, I think what people liked about Obama was that despite all the drone killings or the wars being raged and started or whatever's going on, the economic bailouts and all that stuff, he could stand at the podium and present as if everything is good and great and smooth, and you felt good about it.
He was coherent.
He was very coherent.
He wasn't an embarrassment to listen talk to. Like, I remember hearing the Bush years, and I was like, this guy is speaking for the United States of America. I mean, just this, like, the most banal crap coming out of his mouth.
I hated Bush for that.
And he just sounded like a fucking idiot. I mean, and he's not. He's a smart guy.
He's a smart guy.
Talk right now. Like, he was always gunning for that Joe Sixpack angle, right? I just got to talk to Joe Sixpack, you know, but if you watch the decline and, you know, just the Fleisch Kincaid scores of these speeches, I mean, today these people are talking at the 5th grade level, 4th grade level.
It's gone down. Obama as a statesman, it was smart. It was smooth.
Right.
Despite what you knew was going on.
Well, he was a complete piece of shit, right? Like, I mean, he did, all these people are, and you can't even say it's the person in the chair. It's just like everybody behind the scenes is a fucking asshole. And so it kind of doesn't matter who's sitting in the seat, unless they're aware of what those people are up to and is willing to take it on, which is at threat to your life. They just kind of go with the program. And in Trump's first presidency, he didn't know any of this shit anyway. So he came bungling in there just like, oops, oh, I didn't mean to be here. Oh, shit, you know. And then kind of figured it out on the fly. But he surrounded himself, you know, I'm going to drain the swamp. Then he puts, like, Goldman Sachs in, he put Fauci in, he put all the, and it's just like,
that's the
thing. What the fuck are you doing, dude?
Like, a president can go into it like, I'm going to do all this stuff, and they may even really believe it. And they get there and they realize, oh, well, I'm not doing a lot of what I thought I was going to do the way I thought I was going to do.
I'm not doing anything.
Maybe I'm not doing anything, and I kind of got to be told what I can do. when I see all the glad handing and stuff, like we're all buddies, I'm just like, oh, it's this show. So I don't mind, a little tough guy presence. And
well, if someone came up and shoved Trump out of the way, I think people would get bent out of shape about it, right? So the point is, it's not so much whether it's like you're the president of the United States, have some fucking decorum. Like walk up behind somebody, and go, hey, excuse me, can I get through? Oh, sure, just step aside. Right? You don't just fucking grab somebody by the shoulder.
I'm the president. Get the fuck
yeah. It's like that's not a busboy that you just shoved. That's a leader of one of the sovereign nations of the world. Like, that's not. It's not appropriate under any sense of decorum.
Yeah, it speaks to their character, I guess. And then other things I'll hear about Trump are very, family, thoughtful, tender, and conscientious about people.
Well, that's the. I mean, I guarantee you, if you meet Trump in person, any Democrat, it doesn't matter who it is. Like that guy is 100% going to be super personable, just a great guy to talk to. Like he's just going to be very relatable because you don't get in that position without being really, really good with people. Right? It's just zero chance that's going to happen. So you can watch what he blusters and how he does things on stage. I guarantee you, he's an awesome person. Like every person that's ever worked for him, he's the best guy I've ever worked for in my life. He's
sure.
Great. He would just come up and he talks to the janitor just as much as he talks to the head of the kitchen as he talks to the head of the hotels. And there's no change in his tone. If you watch him out on the golf course, he's talking to people. He's not treating people like subservient. You go talk to someone like Kamala Harris, where I guarantee that people hate her.
Well, what you see is it's like a show, clearly a cackling show, and you're like, I know this is fake. I know it's fake. It don't matter. I don't know what's ever real. Where's that real person that I've never seen before, ever?
Yeah.
And that's what I hate about the politics. So,
well, she's just completely manufactured. Like, I can't remember. There's some high up politician in California that went, oh, she's cute when she was. I mean, he was like 30 years older than she was, and he's basically the whole reason she's got anything going. I mean, she's a legit attorney. She was Attorney General of California.
I know she's got to be smart, but on the political scale, it's like, whoa, we're out of our element here.
Well, but I mean, you could say the same about Trump his first time around. It's just right now, like, I mean, we just watched a soft coup happen, basically, in this country.
That's
and
crazy.
Everyone just sort of shrugged and went, "Oh, yay, Kamala." I mean, nobody gave a
rallied
shit.
behind, like, my God, I admire the integrity to pass the torch and.
Yeah.
As if this was some process that we had.
Yeah, like 10 days ago, the guy said, I'm not leaving. And then 10 days later, they're like, no, you're getting out. But I put a clip on Twitter that was like, you remember when Xi Jinping had that guy just, yanked out of the People's Assembly or whatever, like just right there on camera. He's like hanging onto the desk. And they're like, nope, we're going now. Like that was Joe Biden. Like it just happened behind the scenes. But that was it. Like, there was a guy going, no, hey, wait, what do you mean I'm leaving? No, we're leaving now, dude. You're done.
There was a reaction the weird lack of communication, where is he, what's going on, is he dying of something, or what did he have a stroke? And the narrative about it all just sort of, no, it all makes sense, this is what's happening. And then he'd stepped off the plane like a couple days later, and just a journalist had just said, hey, why'd you step down, or whatever. And he gave one of those, like, laughs of just dismissal, like, laugh, like you could have brought up, hey, there's a meteor kind of coming for the Earth or something,
Right.
And it was this laugh, like some joke.
Right.
And it's like, dude, I don't think you even know yet, or you're fighting it, or you don't know what to say.
Yeah.
But then he made that canned video that he stumbled through. Like, nope, it's a big, good plan.
Right.
I think he has to say that now, but I don't think that's how it played out.
Well, if you look at him, I mean, he's just barely conscious in that whole video.
It's kind of sad. We talk about
weird,
the elder abuse of it all. I mean,
well, I don't care about this guy. He can go fuck himself. I mean, they could lock him in a cage with a bucket to piss in for all I care. I mean, the guy's just an absolute. I mean,
they're criminals.
He's a criminal, but he's been a lifelong DC criminal. Like the guy, the fact that he even ascended to that office is shocking. But it tells you the state of our country and the state of the political machine in our country, and you just. Yeah. But I mean. Through it all, like watching, it's the trouble I have with all this stuff or interacting on Twitter or even talking to anybody, because I just go, both these guys are fucking clowns, and Trump guys just get all bent out of shape and just lose their fucking minds, and the Biden people, I mean, I don't even talk to them because they're just so fucking siloed and just on fucking Mars, dude. I mean, like literally.
It's hard to bridge a gap there. Like, we're we're watching two different movies, and yet we think it's the same name of a movie.
It's,
but I don't relate to what movie you just saw.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, they like, I know I'm fully 100% siloed, because I talk about Bitcoin. That immediately puts you in an algorithmic silo. So you have to work a little bit to get out of that silo. And someone had pointed out, I think it was Scott Adams, said, well, the right is exposed to left-wing media because they actually watch it. Whereas left-wing folks are just watching select clips. And that's their only exposure to right-wing media is when some pundit, some fucking comedian, some late-night talk show guy, Jon Stewart, whatever, is picking little clips so they can tear it apart and go, ha ha ha, look at all these stupid Republican fascists, right?
Yeah, it's just categorically like chopped into, well, you're a fascist, you're for Hitler. Okay,
right, you're a racist, fascist, whatever.
Yeah.
And so the thing is their silo is much broader than like the kind of silo that I'm in. And I'm at least aware that I'm in a silo. Mm-hmm. Like I know when I'm reading the stuff, because it affects me still, despite the fact that I have very conscious awareness of I am being exposed to one-sided information, and it's coming at me from very different angles, and it all is sort of tickling my, like, yeah, that's the way the world should be right now, buttons in me. I still have to step back at the end of it and go, oh, wait a minute, okay, there's another side to all this shit. Don't just get all wrapped up in the latest, whatever thing that is happening to show up on my feed. And I don't watch any traditional media, so I'm not sitting there just sucking on the tit of Fox News or, whatever the Now News Network or whatever, I don't know, whatever these fucking right-wing channels are anymore. But
the Truth Network.
Yeah,
there's a lot.
Yeah,
and I pay attention at all.
I'm not on Truth Social. And,
yeah, I'm not either. I collect it all from all over, and my focus being Bitcoin. But man, when I feel like, gee, my thinking processes are inherently canceled by this opposite end of the spectrum, it's like I don't like feeling like I'd be canceled. Or I have kids, and so I have some skin in the game. And just for this funny anecdotal thing that happened a while ago, school was still in session last spring, and my wife said something to our son, our 10-year-old, who just referring to him as a boy or talking to somebody about he, and and my boy was in the room and made a joke, just said, "Mom, did you just presume my gender?"
Oh, God.
And it was like, it was funny, and it was like, how in the heck is a kid thinking of this stuff, I guess? And I'm not anti-sexual fluidity if people are exploring that for themselves personally or whatever that is. I don't judge it, but he's been a boy, knows he's a boy, is, something that a kid doesn't ever worry about. And so to have that in his head, it was a step back of funny, and then, oh, where'd you hear that? Oh, I don't know, school.
Right.
Okay, how do they talk about that? Well, you never know. And I'm like, okay.
Well, you
can't ever know anything, huh?
Well, that's the more alarming thing about it is that's how insidious all this shit is. And there's an interview from like the 80s or something. There was a Russian defector that came over here, and he talked about the process that Lenin used to destabilize the country and have communism come in. And it's all sort of following that map. You demoralize, you destabilize, and then you initiate a crisis, and then you normalize, right? And right now we are in the process, or they're trying desperately to normalize this. After crisis after crisis after crisis, and by they, it's that sort of body of people that have bought into this sort of narrative, and I think rather uncritically bought into that narrative. And now it permeates out, so we're out here in the middle of bumblefuck nowhere, and your kid is going to school in bumblefuck nowhere, and he's hearing about this shit. And so
it's the public schooling system generally, and culturally, maybe people who are attracted to those kinds of jobs are hearing it and kind of in it.
Well, the entire state government apparatus here is inundated with this shit. Most of the county governments are inundated with this shit, and that's true across the country. Like, everywhere you go, people are talking about this shit, and it is extraordinarily destabilizing to the world.
At a deep level, as humans or as society, it's like we're arguing about this stuff when there's actually tangible, real world problems we should kind of focus on. You know?
Yeah, 100%. Well, there was that kid. You remember that he got absolutely roasted. But Piers Morgan was roasting this kid because he had posted something the day after the Trump shooting. He said something to the effect of, "Yeah, if you went to a Trump rally and you got shot, good. I don't give a shit. Fuck you." Right? Like he thought it was funny, and he just kept digging in. You know, people were like, "How can you say that, man? That guy didn't do anything wrong." He said, "If you're there, 100%, I'm making fun of you next thing on Twitter. Fuck you." And I was, and everybody that heard it, I think, right and left, were sort of shocked and appalled, and all the outrage that they want to feel for the 30 seconds that's in front of their face until they've moved on to the next outrage. And the thing is, I went and looked at this kid, and I watched some of his videos, and I was like, who is this kid? What is he talking about? Why is he such a little turd? And, because I presumed a bunch of stuff about this kid anyway. And I go and watch him, and he talks a lot about the transgender stuff, and he actually got on with, what's the guy that's the big Israeli puppet, but the right likes him anyway?
Doesn't narrow it down.
He's about 100.
Which one?
No, he's a really slick talker, kind of younger guy, dark hair. I can't remember his fucking name right now.
Not Shapiro.
Yeah, Shapiro.
Ben Shapiro. Okay.
Ben Shapiro.
Mm-hmm.
So he was on a show with Ben Shapiro, and I watched them sort of go back and forth for a while. I can't remember this fucking little wackadoodle kid's name. I mean, he's a fucking potato, right? Like, he's a gamer that just shot to internet fame. And so when he was talking about Shapiro, and he said, well, this is a dumb gotcha, he said, what is a woman? And he sort of went into this whole thing about, like, if you talk about the etymology of the word and, what does it, and he had valid points, like, because you could ask the same question, okay, well, what's a rock? Define a rock. You can't, right? Like, it would be impossible to do that. So
you know it when you see it, like.
Right, but if you try and pin it down as to say, oh, these people are playing with language because they're trying to change what it means to be a rock. Mm-hmm. But the other side, when they say, oh, okay, then what's a rock? Define a rock. And if the other person says, well, you can't really define a rock, they're technically correct. Because it's a general thing, it's a way for us to convey information to each other about the world and how we perceive it, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that there is like one uniform meaning behind the word rock.
It's like Pluto is no longer a planet. Oh, okay. I mean,
well, but it's different than that because we're talking about a definitional thing, right? Like Pluto is whether or not they've categorized it as a thing.
They decided based on reasons, on size or whatever.
But the thing I'm talking about is the core characteristic of, like, define a chair. Because when someone says, hey, well, okay, what's a woman? And they say, well, a woman is a thing with boobs and can have babies. Well, yeah, and, his point is that you can sort of make that malleable. I look at it from the counterpoint and say, well, now you're just fundamentally disrupting shared reality. Because, yeah, you can dither on these academic conversations about the etymology of words and how meaning comes to be assigned to things and this and that and the other thing. But if you just fundamentally say chairs aren't chairs anymore, and we cannot define a chair so nobody knows what a chair is, you can't operate in the world anymore because you can't sit on anything. Just like you can't pick up a rock because it's not a rock anymore. We're going to call this a purple fucking rainbow. And you just fundamentally screw up reality and screw up everybody's shared reality and shared understanding of at least base concepts, right?
Yeah, and I can distinguish between gender, say, and gender identity, okay, sure, versus biological sex, which can actually, and has always been, measured in particular ways and is knowable. And so that's fine. Biological sex, gender or gender identity or people's interests.
Gender and gender identity are two different things, right? And like if you look at the etymology of the word gender, for 400 years they said that was a euphemism of different way to express biological sex. 400 years, everyone has had a very common understanding. Gender refers to biological sex. Rather than say, what is your biological sex? They say, what is your gender? Mm-hmm. And for the most part, people agreed on that. And then the wackadoodle folks came along and said, well, there's a gender identity. I can identify with a different gender, but even when they start talking about that, they're talking about superficial characteristics. They're not talking about anything other than socially constructed ideas of how gender is expressed. And that's their side, not, the other side, right? But then somewhere along the line, they turned it into, no, this is just gender. We're changing the meaning of gender from we are referencing biological sex to now we're referencing identity, but it means the same thing. Mm-hmm. So therefore, a woman can be a man and a man can be a woman because those are inherently tied to gender. I mean, it's this twisted, convoluted fucking thing.
Well, then you get Wikipedia saying that, like, literally, modern science has determined that if they use gender or sex, but that it is, a social construct. And it's like...
No, it's not. That's fundamentally false.
I have a problem with that when the American Medical Association says that birth certificates can't determine sex.
Right.
Like, a baby's born, I'm sorry, but
Well, there's that whole, like, assignment thing. And, whether or not it's appropriate to categorize people based on their reproductive capacities, it doesn't really matter. We're still talking about navigating in shared space and shared reality. And that's the ultimate sort of thing at the bottom of it. And if you want to fundamentally disrupt that, then you are invoking a lot of very serious things that can be implied from all of that. I look at it more from, like, the Marxist ideology thing of, like, well, that's how you destabilize things. Is the first thing you do is attack knowledge and attack shared reality, and then just gaslight the shit out of people until nobody can trust anything. And then you can introduce a crisis, and then once you have the crisis, then you can normalize the new regime. Mm-hmm. Which is precisely what Lenin did. It's precisely what Mao Zedong did. That's every communist revolution does that same. They follow that same playbook because it works. And currently, we have just crossed crisis, and they are now in the process of trying to normalize it. But it's kind of falling apart on it right now.
Well, and I feel sorry for kids growing up in a world where you don't know stuff, or you just would presume stuff, but it can be judged in wrong, and or that our existence is going to boil the oceans, and life's a calamity, and life's so bad, and no wonder kids are, like, depressed or suicidal or confused and just I don't know anything, and I also need to be special, so I'm just going to be so different. There's this, like, pressure to find yourself. I mean, it's, as a kid growing up, it's hard anyway.
Right.
And on top of that, you're navigating, well, what's the least wrong? Because you feel all this, like, wrongness out there.
Yeah.
And I just feel sorry for kids where when I grew up,
a little more straightforward.
You didn't worry about it. You just were who you were. And when kids were different, whether it was, there was the tomboys or the boys who might be gay, there was bullying that happened. But it's like, target the bullying, target the discrimination, target the hate. Yes, please. But don't confuse kids just not needing to worry about sex until a certain age. I don't know. Let them be kids.
Yeah, I mean, ideally you could. And here's, the cancel this clothing company guy, cancel Coco, whatever it is. I mean, he puts out all these videos. He's pretty good at putting out these little things that are sort of exposing, like, Monsanto and the connections to the deep state and yada, yada, yada. He's a fun guy to watch. But one of his early videos, which really resonated with me because he was talking about climate change, for one thing. He said, look, the left gets it wrong because they keep talking about the air. And they keep talking about how we need to fix the air. And then the right gets it wrong because they try and deny the fact that CO2 emissions are increasing and it's problematic because they see what the people are proposing as solutions.
It's like an oppositional stance to take. Like,
right.
You see something you don't like, and the oppositional stance may not be
So
correct
it's funny,
either.
like Elon Musk, who, like, the right is a darling of the right now, and he's openly supporting Trump and whatnot. He can say, look, CO2 emissions are a problem. And people get, that's fake news, blah, blah. The point that the right is getting wrong about that is it's not that CO2 emissions are not a problem. Yes, all the information that they're proposing to fix it is the problem. 100%. So, of course, it looks like a scam. The thing they're conflating is these people are proposing solutions that are going to make them rich, are not going to fix the problem.
Tax the air.
And we can see that. Mm-hmm. So, therefore, we think the whole problem is false. And that's the wrong leap. Mm-hmm. Both sides, but the cancel clothing company guy, cancel Coco, his point is to look at it and say, look, carbon capture can happen in the soil, and what's happening right now is these industrial chemical manufacturers are depleting the soil with resources, and then they're creating seeds that can only grow in that kind of depleted soil.
Gotta fertilize it with our fertilizer or
right.
Roundup Ready, whatever.
Yeah, so they're poisoning the entire planet for profit. Mm-hmm. And if they just stop doing that and let renewable agriculture take over, then and get back to, like, normal, 10,000 years of agricultural practice that has figured out, hey, we can grow stuff without screwing everything up and destroying the ecosystem and destroying the microorganisms in the soil, all of a sudden your carbon issue goes away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, then the focus is on the air rather than on the ground. But there's a lot of profit to be made in trying to regulate the air. No profit in getting everybody to stop spraying chemicals and doing a bunch of stupid shit and not providing renewable soil.
Yeah, I'd heard an interesting years ago about, greenhouse gases and effect and concerns there, sure. The agricultural practices we have about how we grow massive industrial crops, and that you have to have pesticides and fertilizers. And then, but what's the concern? Okay, so say we have access to these chemicals, and we can apply them, and they work. Okay, but measuring actual soil depth, the Great Plains and the farm belts and all that stuff, they've been able to measure just the legitimate soil depth, quality soil depth,
right.
Farmable land, and the soil depth has decreased significantly in ways that also, like the Ogallala aquifers losing water.
Yeah.
So there are these real planetary type problems that we've got to be watching, see coming, adjust around. And we can't just keep doing the industrial thing just because it works for now. If our soil decreases, our aquifers are drying up. Yep, those are problems.
Yeah, huge problem.
So, but is creating a carbon tax or an air tax or soil tax, is that how we do it?
No.
Or do we adjust because it's making us sick?
Right.
Like, just out of a public health concern, we do the right thing because it's in our face and it's the thing to do.
Well, they can't, because right now the entire political apparatus of the entire globe is captured by these industrialists that want to perpetuate and continue this game because that's how they make their money, you know. And like, if you just think about the agricultural practices, like, animals need to graze land and poop on the land and then stir up the plants and eat the wrong plants and let the right plants grow and all that kind of stuff. And there's that whole cycle of life thing that people know how to manage pretty well these days. And they don't let it happen. Instead, they've industrialized everything, and they do row farming and spray pesticides and do everything they can to combat nature. They're not existing in harmony with nature, period.
Well, and Monsanto themselves, the predatory shit they've done with their GMOs and other farmers, and that's criminal. It's sick.
Well, it's legal, so unfortunately, it's But I agree with you 100%. It's
ethically criminal, legally legal.
Right. Yeah, but that's
no. We have this patent, and our crops ended up on your field. What did you do? The wind blew my way from your shit.
Yeah.
Sorry. They're suing farmers for having wind-blown crops go into their thing, and they're saying, you have our patented seed on your field. And the farmer's like, I don't want it.
You know, when the Supreme Court ruled that you can patent biology, there were no shortage of people saying, you cannot do that. That's going to cause problems. And they predicted literally all of these things that are happening. And they got dismissed at the time, and because the political apparatus is compromised by big ag, big pharma, big weapons, big everything. All these big conglomerates have captured entirely our political apparatus. And these people are such self-serving, narcissistic fucking goons that they won't do anything about it, because that's how they line their pockets. Mm-hmm. So everyone is just in this great big circle of grift, and no one has the willpower, capacity, or desire to change any of it. And a lot of it is funded through, fiat nonsense, and that's sort of how the whole game is developed and is being played now. But
it is our fiat state.
Well, that's the nature of the fiat state. With the, at the end of it all, it's like when it comes to the politics of things, and the thing I was getting to with like the agricultural stuff is, if you think about how much industrial waste goes into producing food, and then you look at just how much food is wasted.
Yep.
So it's like this great big process of waste to ensure continual fiat profits that are inflating constantly.
Yeah.
And
in the Farm Bill, you pass laws about making things organic, or organic labels. Sure. And you can have an organic Twinkie because the cheap food, like you make this corn in a certain way, but you're still processing it to all hell. And you make a Twinkie that, no, this is an organic Twinkie.
Right.
And it's going to make you sick.
Yeah.
If you eat enough of them. So the Farm Bill will go out.
Delicious, though. I do like a Twinkie.
I'm a sucker for Fiat food.
Yeah,
I'm no
too.
straight edge cuckoo doodle, but I know it's a balance. The farm bill goes out, and it's a big subsidy bill for big soy and big corn, and
it's all horseshit.
And then the organic farmers are milk producers, et cetera. They're jumping all these hoops to survive as a small farm because no, you have to do all this stuff that costs a lot of money and regulation and certifications and stuff. And they're like, I've got like 5 cows.
Right.
Can I sell my milk?
Nope.
Or can I? Well, like the unpasteurized milk movement. I'm not into that, but okay, I get it. And just like, can I sell to my friend this milk that he trusts I harvest in a certain way, and I sell to him directly? No, you have to jump through a lot of hoops and stuff. You don't want a public illness to break out. I get that, but that's the nature of big centralized powers regulating a big industry all across the board. Everyone has to do this, and it, lo and behold, through the lobbyists, whatever, it benefits the industries. And the smaller guys are, okay, yeah, no, they don't want trouble. And yes, they don't want to make people sick. And if there's an outbreak, who is dealing with that and how? But it's not a free market. It's like, you will all do this thing.
Well, it's never been a free market. I mean, here's the thing, though. If you start tracing back, because I watched the pasteurized milk people, and they'd get all wrapped around the axle about this shit, too. And the thing is if you trace back the history of milk and you start seeing what milk producers back in the day, like small producers and all that, they would put they put antifreeze and all kinds of weird shit into the milk to try and, I mean, they were literally poisoning people.
Trying to keep their milk lasting, yeah.
Trying to keep their milk fresh and trying to just get rid of stuff. They had horrible hygiene practices and people were getting sick all the goddamn time. And someone came along and said, hey, we can't keep killing people with milk. Like, this is ridiculous. And so they started passing these pasteurization and purity laws and things like that. Not because, these small farmers were all such great people that were doing all this conscientious stuff.
They were bad actors.
They were just fucking horrible human beings that could give a flying fuck about anybody but making some money, and they knew no one was going to ring them up on it. That was it. So it's great to look back today and say, oh, these milk producers are such, because they use these sterilization practices and milk is so safe now and yada, yada, yada. I say the second you take the reins off, they're going to go right back to the same bullshit they were doing 100 years ago where they were just killing people and they didn't give a shit.
Yeah, and not across the board, but you're going to have those situations where it's like, oh, shit.
And some libertarian dickhead will come along and say, oh, the free market will sort it out. It didn't. It 100% did not, because that was an absolutely unregulated free market in milk, and people were getting poisoned left, right, and center. Kids were getting killed. They were getting sick for years and years and years.
Yeah.
It was not, the free market did not come to the rescue. And so those, it was because the government didn't let this happen or that happen or whatever. The point is if you just keep tracing all this stuff back, there's always these waves of people. And when you're talking about a competitive resource-based economy where people can capture resources and do anything they can to maximize the extraction of resources, then they're going to try and cheat, bend the rules. And so they come up with rules to try and fix that, which then causes some other clusterfuck, which causes some other clusterfuck. And you end up with the situation we're in now, where these people are mass poisoning and mass killing people slowly in a profit sense, and then they're going to come up with some new regulations to try and stop that, but they just keep spiraling off into fucking stupidity, and you end up with these really absurd outcomes. Like,
well, when you follow the money, there's so much money behind it. You see the centralized power bad outcomes of things.
Precisely, but that's what that bad actor regulatory cycle inevitably leads to. Is sooner or later the regulations become so complex that it 100% filters out the bad actors, and it makes it so there's only a few actors that can actually adhere to all this shit. And so you get this generalized sort of base improvement on core conditions, right? Like, the milk is not universally toxic anymore. At least you have a reasonable degree of certainty that most of the milk I'm drinking today isn't going to kill me. And yet, if you look at the pasteurized milk versus unpasteurized milk, like, there's always more outbreaks associated with the pasteurized stuff. And, the unpasteurized stuff, they can usually trace to something. And they tend to be less problematic. And yet, if you just let it go, because all it takes is the one dumbass that just goes, I don't give a shit, I'm just going to fucking squirt this stuff in here, and I'll put a little dab of this, and then put some ammonia in there, and fix it right up, and now my milk won't. And
Yeah, and you're treating your cows and you're doing stuff, and the hygiene involved in all of that, dealing with a cow, his ass is there, her ass is there, and
Right.
the milk's there. Keeping that clean is not straightforward all the time.
Right.
I mean,
and so, yeah, there's going to be conscientious actors that do it right. There are going to be people that have worked on farms for 100 years and never had a problem with it. My grandparents and my great-grandparents and my great-great-grandparents all drank raw milk, lived on a farm,
Mm-hmm.
You know, most of them lived to be in their 90s. My grandfather also ate raw pork every day, or great-grandfather ate raw pork every day for all of his life. Raw. And lived to be 96. Would you recommend it today? No, that's a bad idea. And today, pork farming practices are way better than they were then. Like, your likelihood of getting worms from raw pork today is significantly reduced from the time when my great-grandfather was out there slaughtering his own pigs. But I think he had proper feeding practices for the pigs that didn't incorporate the kind of waste that creates the worms, and et cetera, et cetera. But he didn't know. He was just...
And that's the thing. You could have, if it was free market, open-ended, like, okay, all the little farmers are doing their thing, and they don't want trouble, and they're doing their best, but you do get some kind of an outbreak. One, are they going to know until someone dies? And then when somebody dies, do they know why? And how long? Yeah, you want to prevent all the badness, but the broad regulatory environment creates, so you get a large conglomerate where, they're following all the rules, right?
Yeah.
And we get a listeria outbreak or a salmonella outbreak, and it's not just, this farm needs help here.
Right.
It's like, no, we recalled all of the nation's lettuce right now.
Right.
It's like, what the...
Well, and that's precisely it. Is like the people keep working on two different things. They say, I want freedom. I want someone to fix this problem. I want freedom. I want someone to fix this problem. And the free market people say, just let the market sort it out. The market has proven repeatedly, over and over and over again, it will not solve problems like that. Like, it just absolutely will not, cannot, won't. Because if there's no enforcement mechanism on don't poison people, if you're just relying on private suits, then it's up to every single person that gets sick from something to go figure out, to go trace back and do all this detective work, and then file the lawsuit. And if you're some poor person who just went, oh yeah, I bought this milk and I got sick, and you don't know what caused it, there's zero chance you're going to be able to enforce that. Even if you were the most sophisticated person in the world, you had all the resources to trace that down, do a scientific analysis, figure out where that poisoning came from, and then bring the lawsuit and then prosecute it in such a way that you could actually prevail in the lawsuit. That guy goes, oh, okay, here's a check, sorry about that, and just keeps right on poisoning people. So without the regulatory state, you end up with people just profiteering off human suffering, which they really try to avoid throughout human history. They say, hey, that's not great. We don't want to incentivize poisoning people. We don't want to incentivize starving people. We don't want to incentivize like tenement housing and not having plumbing. And we don't want to incentivize these things, but it's very profitable to do all of those things. So the regulatory apparatus comes in, but the natural flow of that is centralization of resources, which then makes it so much harder to combat when they start doing things that are now technically legal, and when they're petitioning to make their shenanigans legal, and they want to make their toxicity legal, and they want to influence science, and they want to, so you end up in a irreconcilable loop.
It's part of it's an interesting human condition that I could really get into it. Working for government as we do, I see how, the good people doing good hard work, and you get busy. You've got bureaucratic processes. You're doing your best, and you can only give so much time to so many people with how much money from where, who's paying for this. And yet, so it'd be like, governments can do their absolute best, and you have good people trying, and they're spread thin, or they have to operate on a fairly transactional human level with this case on a big caseload, and you get to feeling like, well, here's government trying to help. Good luck. On another level, it's like, okay, distribute it all. Like, hey, here's this guy with a problem, but he's going to church and his pastor is working it out. It's handled in the community. That can be good. I've also seen situations where a pastor could be like, oh no, yeah, I'm meeting with him, I'm talking with him, he's doing good right now. And it's like, what evidence-based stuff is that, though?
Right.
They're not. Actually, right. I can tell you they're not.
Yeah.
Oh no, we're handling it. We have a process ourselves. It's local.
Yeah.
Not working.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right.
I don't know what the fix is. Like, where's the balance between regulation and independence? And so, say for me, to get psychopathic again about Bitcoin, if we had a good fixed hard money and the money system was fixed and we're on a Bitcoin type standard, say the money was fixed, I could see where, okay, there's one problem alleviated with the propelled push to get more short-term thinking, the greed. Say we were on a Bitcoin standard and the money was fixed. People being these smart animals, there's always that greed, or I can get more. I think those incentives could still be there. Better.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be as bad maybe, but I feel like we'll always be dealing with bad actors because people, even if your money's good and you feel some comfort or stability there, down in there it's like, can I get more? Can I work that? I'm just a bad person.
Potentially. I mean, I think, like, there are zero bad people that say they're bad people, right? That's the whole thing, is like, you cannot, if you want to talk to, pick your worst horrible character from history and talk to them in the moment and say, do you think you're evil? They're not going to go, yeah.
Well, like, I want to say,
the most evil person ever.
most stats are just made up on the fly, but I remember long ago, I want to say it was like 80% of people, when taking a test, they just, are you below average, average, or above average?
Right. They're all above average.
Mathematically,
50% of you were below
yeah.
average. Yeah.
So 80% of people say they're like above average.
Yeah, at everything.
And it's like, no.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you know, well, that's precisely it. Like, people are terrible at self-evaluation. People rely exclusively on heuristics to navigate the world, and with good reason, because that's how you can, you know, this little sensory organ system that we have here is just so we don't, you know, so the organism can survive, right? It's how we interact. It's how we interface with the world. And so when you start talking about objective reality, shared reality, all those sort of things, like, if you could see through the mind of a dolphin, the world looks very different because they rely on sound and different perceptual tools process information for their brains so they can survive in the world. And just like a spider is going to process things very different, and a bird, and you know, I mean, all creatures that have to navigate gravity and wind and cold and heat and all that stuff.
It's a mind fuck to put your mind in the mind of an animal, that how it processes and experiences the world. Anyway, I've thought about that stuff. It's like,
well, you know, there's the problem we have is that we're not necessarily getting all the correct information. We are getting enough information to make sure that our biological system does not collapse in this environment. But it doesn't mean that we are actually seeing the environment or interacting with the environment, like on a subatomic level or, you know, or quantum level or anything like that. Like, that's all opaque to us.
sure.
Just like there's spectrums of light that are opaque to us. And
We operate in a certain frequency.
right.
We're stuck. Sorry.
Yeah, that's where we're
As
stuck.
far as we know, we're stuck.
And so how you navigate that world and then create rules to operate in it, understanding that you don't really know what reality is, I mean, from a functional quantum level of things, it becomes problematic, right? So, like, how you fix that, if you say, well, if we fix the money, but there's so many presumptions wrapped up into everything that we talk about. Like, it's nearly impossible to unpack some of these problems. Because if you look at the optimal state for a human being, and just objectively speaking, it is, as best I can tell, to be in little small groups of people, about between 50 to 150 people, that run around, pick berries, gather nuts, kill animals, and live in little huts. And they sort of follow animals around. And that seems to be the optimum environment for human beings to operate and thrive in. Like, just from a pure mental health perspective, an emotional health perspective, a physical health perspective, those people tend to be very healthy and very lean and pretty content with life. And they don't spend a lot of time to do it. It's something on the order of about 20 hours a week that they have to spend to meet survival needs and exist in a nice community where everyone gets along and has a good time and makes little baskets and whatever the fuck it is they do to get through the day every day. And that humanity cannot be supported much beyond about, 5 or 6 million people living that way on Earth,
the planet.
On the planet, like, the planet can comfortably accommodate that. How much that population can expand beyond that before resources start getting depleted and all that sort of stuff gets tricky. It's like, I don't think anyone has sat down and said Earth is capable of supporting exactly 15.6 million people before resources are going to deplete faster than the environment. Like they did it for fish in the Gulf of Mexico. They said, hey, if you keep fishing at this rate, these things are all going to be gone. You need to cut your fishing down by like 60% this year, 40% next year, and then you can fish this many. All of you can fish exactly this amount of fish, and it will continually be sustainable forever. So they can work it out, but I don't think anyone's worked it out for human beings. So with the introduction of agriculture, you suddenly make it so people are universally less healthy. Like it's not as healthy for us to eat wheat and soybeans and corn. It's not as healthy for us to go out and just farm and live a sedentary life or be in one area, not move around, not hunt things, not be, that kind of stuff. It's not as healthy for us. The stature of those people comes down, the dental quality comes down, the organ quality comes down, the life expectancy comes down, all across the board with the introduction of agriculture. But you can make a lot more people that way, right? The thing that's neat with having a lot more people is you get a lot more ideas about things. Mm-hmm. So you're expanding the collective consciousness, you're expanding the possibility, you're also starting to reach into the tail probabilities of, hey, we just birthed an Einstein. Like some guy who's not so great, would never have made it as a hunter-gatherer, is now able and afforded the time to sit and think about stuff and look at the world, pick it apart, and start creating new shit. Mm-hmm. So then you end up in that iterative process where we are today, right? And trying to button all that up and figure out the optimal way to do all that, and the optimal way to exchange all of that, and the optimal way to grow all that, when it's all suboptimal from agriculture on. Like everything is a suboptimal process that is enabling humanity to expand.
Mm-hmm. Not that we were getting ourselves sick doing agriculture, it's just that it wasn't the same lifestyle.
No, it got us sick. I mean, like, if you go look at the Plains Indians from, like, the Midwest, those guys, when the European explorers came across them, these guys were standing like 6'4", 6'5". I mean, these guys were monsters. They were just big, huge, hulking, super healthy people. Their teeth are great. They're not brushing their teeth. They weren't trading using wampum or whatever people make up about that lifestyle.
Right.
But they were just living on the plains and hunting and eating a truck ton of bison. Well,
and there's like, say, jungle tribes that live the hunter-gatherer lifestyles and stuff, and I don't know. I mean, there's some short pygmies out there or whatnot.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to think about it all. When I think of the carrying capacity of the planet, I totally know what you mean about sustainability and lifestyle. I think agriculture can be compatible for a sustainable long-term human existence, but it is different. Is it going to kill us? I mean,
no. I mean, it's not to say like the whole origin of that little diatribe that I just went off on for the last 45 minutes. I guess I don't know how long I've been sitting here mattering on.
You've been talking about this for like 45 minutes.
Yeah, it's just me, just like
quit my job and I'm just going to hunt the squirrels.
The sort of the original, the genesis of that whole stupid long conversation was, how does the money fix that?
Yeah,
and that's the thing I keep trying to wrap my head around while I'm writing the book, and when we talk, and when I talk to anybody out in the world, is the amount of presumptions that come into just the existence of money to begin with mm-hmm. are enormous, right? And so if you start from the assumption that, okay, we are an agricultural society, we have to be that, or else a lot of people die.
At this point now,
this is baked in. It's part of the cake.
We're not going back.
We are certainly not going back to hunter-gatherer unless someone can figure out some way to, will that shit into existence so you can go, twink, hey, I hunted a thing that just came out of nowhere, and now I can cut it up and act like a hunter-gatherer, but it doesn't affect the ecological resources. Mm-hmm. So how does money fix it? If you can figure out a base layer rule, if we assume and presume, because as we've been talking about regulations and, there's a reason why these things come along and that thing. If your baseline regulation is, and you take your baseline assumption of, we need to divide labor, we need to have specialization, we need to have some level of complexity to make sure everyone gets fed, housed, clothed, and, well, that's it. I mean, you need to meet the basis of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and have some security, right? Someone's not going to come conk you on the head and steal your shit. So if you just start that at the base level, and the only way you can trade it is based on a very set rule set, the kind of rules and regulations that come growing out of that, I think, become very different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the incentives become very different. And
Yeah.
it may well be something to the effect of, like, if every human being on planet Earth had a half-acre spread and was granted X amount of soil, X amount of seeds, and X amount of, like, bolts of cloth or something. I don't know. Figure it out. That's all you get. Here you go. Go nuts. Would people figure out how to trade, build things, get together, come up with... Of course they would, right? Because the human creativity and spirit would thrive in such an environment. And especially if no one could cheat. If you had magical boundaries around your piece of land and magical everything, and everybody could see what everybody else is doing and know who's cheating, who's not trying to cheat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, then you would find humanity sort of working, because there's obviously going to be someone that's going to get their half-acre of land and they're going to have no legs, or they're going to be mentally deficient somehow, or not able
You're
to...
getting older and you don't have kids, and who's helping you out?
Right. So in the tribal model, they take care of those people. Absolutely. There's no question about it. They don't have to go, well, you got to pay me to go take care of Grandpa. Everyone just understands naturally, oh, yeah, they're old. We should probably help them because they can't run. They can't go chase a thing down.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still valuable to our tribe because they know shit. They've been around for a long time. So let's make sure we feed them and we'll carry them around. And, you know, the Inuit were a little less charitable about it, but they're also way closer to the survival threshold.
Mm-hmm.
People that are in the jungles are far more generous about that because they're not anywhere near the survival threshold. They can quite literally walk 10 feet, grab something off a tree, and eat it, and they're fine. Whereas if you're in the polar north, you have to be able to do stuff or you're going to die up there, right? So they're elderly. When they get to a point where they recognize their burden, they don't go, hey, everybody take care of me, carry me around the frozen tundra. They go, I'm going to go out and just die.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done. You know, they recognize it and they go do it. But
it's hard for modern society to reconcile any kind of survival threshold at this point. I mean, it's like no one should ever die at all. You know, keep people alive for as long as we can. And the humanitarian, I understand that. I think when you think about getting off the Fiat standard of lifestyles and what we're used to, and if we had to get real, like as animals on a planet with a carrying capacity based on lifestyles that are sustainable, where is the threshold there? Where do people live well and then end of life ends, and how you grapple with that? I like to think about the future in terms of where it's all going, and if we in my mind, if we get sustainable in our lifestyles, old age and grappling with these kinds of problems changes.
Yeah.
You're not just presuming, no. Old people need all these meds and can have all these surgeries, and normal life goes to 90 or 100 because
Right.
it's got to.
Right.
It's hard to reconcile end of life management, I mean, it gets hard. Basically, our standards are sort of what we think is normal right now. If humans were to be living sustainably on a planet, man, how do we grapple with these hard situations where we can't sustain certain practices, like medically maybe? I don't know.
All of our practices are unsustainable. That's the sort of core problem. And like, you know, I watch people, like there's that financial physics guy, I talk about him from time to time. You know, he's now saying stuff like, well, once people lost the means of production, and I go, you're talking communist shit straight up right now. Like you're talking about people rising up and taking control of production. Mm-hmm. That's straight out of the Communist Manifesto, dude. And if I shared that with him, I'm not being a communist, I'm saying that, you know, corporations are taking, I go, yeah, that's what they said too. So, but he would call himself probably a staunch libertarian or anarcho-capitalist or whatever, but he's talking about retrieving the means of production, putting it back in the hands of people. It's straight up workers rise up and take the means of production because the proletariat are enslaving you to, you know. And so it's this distribution of resources and the way we set everything up right now is incredibly wasteful. Mm-hmm. Our entire society, especially in the West, in the United States and Europe, is predicated on the idea of waste. Everything that goes into having a job invokes waste. Everything that has to do with building a building invokes waste. Everything that has to do with roads invokes waste. Petroleum extraction, energy generation, it all is just this tremendously wasteful process because that's where the profits come from.
And if it's not growing in a certain way, the economy is going to fail. Like we have to keep this propeller going the way it is.
Right.
It's like, how do you back that off and not like, yeah, is there a soft landing, soft transition?
Well, that's the sort of hope of my book, and is like that there will be, because nobody wants just chaos all over the place, and despite the neocons really pushing for chaos right now, like, and neocons are left and right, by the way. They're not. There is no red, there is no blue. There is the state, and there is you, and the state is very much embedded in the idea of like we need to push the world to the brink of, or if not cross, the line of destruction. Mm-hmm. And those are the people that are wielding the levers of power right now, but the fiat system allows them to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you can start disincentivizing that, like if you can stop the United States from being like the largest rogue terrorist nation on planet Earth, then suddenly things get a lot better. So right now, that's fiat driven, you know. Mm-hmm. But even just saying that out loud, I say America is the largest rogue terrorist nation in the world. Oh, America's the greatest freedom. What the fuck are you talking about, man? Like, we're going around destabilizing governments, causing, revolutions, encouraging genocide. You cannot objectively look at this and go, hey, that's all in the name of freedom and humanity.
What I like about it is that the vision's there, what was written down on paper laid the foundation for the ideals, but has our government after Washington ever followed that very well?
No.
No. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And so then it's like it's this pipe dream that's our origin story and our roots. And yet it's like quaint or, but reality now is,
Well,
no,
the reality never was, though. I mean, from day one, they said, hey, this is America, the great nation of the free, and this and that and the other thing. And, hey, who are these brown guys over here? Like, what are these guys living in these teepees? Get rid of them. They're getting in the way of... they just slaughtered
the western expansion and all that. It just,
that's a naked genocide.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And, but, that's different because they didn't know. There's no excuse. You can't say, we're a country founded on principles of freedom and liberty and yada, yada, yada. And the way we got established was by slaughtering everyone that was here first.
It's like, yes, I know that, but, there's farmland out there that they're hunting bison on,
Yeah.
I believe in the ideals. I know it has never really played out appropriately, it's been horrible. But I do believe in the ideals, and I just feel like, man, we can't forget them. We have to go back to them, and how do we do that? But then people get wrapped up in the next president. So the most genius, never has to sleep, perfect person in the world, say, who has all the right ideals and is going to just do nothing but hammer on that with a great team. And they get elected into office and they start going after it.
And they can't.
I don't think any president can do much crap about
it's impossible.
The system.
The system is designed to not be movable.
So while I have my preferences or whatever, people are like, Biden, Harris, Trump, RFK. Okay, they can say all the right stuff for who they're talking to, or say you have a person that is going to do and say all the right stuff, and it's true.
Right.
You hit this
wall
swamp,
of reality,
and you're not going to really get a lot done. And in fact, I think if you try too hard or whatever, you're going to
get
shot.
Shot. Yeah.
Character assassinated at best,
and actual
assassination
at worst
as an option on the shelf. So that's where I'm just like, I enjoy it as like entertainment, but not to say I've transcended politics. I just don't believe in much. I like, okay, I like hearing that. Oh, okay, I like that person. Okay, I don't like that. I don't like that person. Fine. And it's, what is the president going to do?
Right.
I was trying to visualize, like, what if Trump, and maybe he's made his speech by now.
Oh, yeah.
He stands up there and says, wouldn't it be amazing to have, just words, whatever. But he says, I'm going to create a strategic reserve of Bitcoin in America, and I'm going to audit the Federal Reserve. In fact, I'm going to appoint a specific chairman. It's going to be Saifedean, or Michael Saylor is going to be the chairman of the Federal Reserve. He's not going to do it. But we're going to change this and fix this. And so, whoa! Now it's symbolic.
Potentially.
But could it be changed?
Well, that's the thing is, like, if you can fix that base layer rule set, right, which The fact that people are even talking about a U.S. strategic reserve of Bitcoin is just astonishing to me. Because if you had said those words out loud 4 years ago, you would have been laughed out of every single room in the world.
The narrative has made a huge shift.
I mean, it's monumental, and people are still, now I'm seeing people getting wrapped around the axle about, don't start simping for politicians. They're not there to help you. It's like,
Right.
Do you understand where the conversation is right now? If you walked into any room 10 years ago, in 2014, and said, Bitcoin is going to be a U.S. strategic reserve asset someday. Presidents are going to be talking about this. Everybody's going to be talking about it. The CEO of BlackRock is going to be on TV shilling Bitcoin. People would laugh at you for hours. They would just think you're the biggest fucking moron that's ever existed on planet Earth because you dared say something like that. Antonopoulos was talking to rooms of 4 people, and you can see people getting up and walking out because they're rolling their eyes at him saying this guy's a moron. And today, we have the leading presidential contender, distant third presidential contender. Kamala Harris is even breathing those words, Bitcoin, is coming out of her mouth now.
I entertained the idea of speaking at the conference, backed out because, they're
she's going to get her head shit on.
Yeah.
The second she takes the stage, it's just going to be,
boo!
Fucking
just
died,
would look so bad. I think she would, I bet the DNC certainly would love to try to get that voting block. They just knew it would be such a bad set of video for them.
Oh, God, they've screwed that up ages ago, dude. There's no, and they got Elizabeth Warren, just these fucking clowns talking about this stuff.
Well, the co-signer of the bill, the Warren, and was it Graham, or I can't remember his name now, but the other co-signer of the anti-crypto legislation stuff backed out.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, it's still just the president and just the politics. And does it matter? Does Bitcoin care? No, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And culturally, narrative-wise, it is such an amazing, huge shift in consciousness.
Yeah.
And I get, like I mentioned to you off channel here earlier, it's like I get people, I'd sort of planted some seeds and they were aware. And then, you let it sit, and I left them alone. And then they hear about it. They hear about it from other people. And people got to have heard it on the channel, the legacy mainstream stuff somewhere else. Oh, Bitcoin. Oh, I'm hearing of this now. Now I'm approved to think about it. And I get inquiries about it in a way that's like, well, it just took that establishment approval that we can talk about this now. It's not crazy.
Yeah. Well, that what this is amounting to is like a software update for the bots. That's all it is.
Yeah, it's an update.
They're pushing out, MPC, good global citizen update, A-364.20. That's the new update right now. Bitcoin's allowed to be talked about. Right? And now the bots can beep, beep, boop, boop, and do their little bot language. But people are devoting zero resources to thinking about this. Considering it, if they have something that sounds smart that they can parrot at a party, they will. And if they don't, they won't. And if it's something they've never heard before, they will just reflexively reject it. And if it's something they have heard before, they will reflexively parrot some little
what they've heard.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're quite literal bots. They're just NPCs. It's just like if you walked into a game of World of Warcraft and you're new, and they updated the software so this thing says "Welcome to the tavern" instead of "Hello, adventurer." Like that's it. That's the only thing that's changed. Is they just got their script updated. They're still going to do whatever bot thing they do, but they're essentially just they're just.
When I find myself doing that,
biology.
So now I'm suspicious of any narratives ever. I hear of things. I'm like, okay, well, we'll see. I'll just put that on the shelf as something I've heard, or I don't know. Bitcoin's been different for me, where you do your own research and you learn, but you percolate that and you come up with your own processes and opinions about it. But when I'm living my life and I'm busy, work's busy, family's busy, and then something's coming around in the narrative, I don't have a lot to go on, and when the conversation's surrounding it, I find myself easily falling into patterns of, well, they're talking about it in a certain way, and at some level, to the extent that I know it, I have thoughts, but man, I'm uninformed. But there's that, whether it's our ego or whatever it is, you want to engage in the conversation at a level where you can, be talking about it and not knowing anything, it's easy just to slip into, I'm going to talk about it in a way as if I have a sense of it,
Right.
and not admit that I have no freaking clue.
Right.
Because we don't.
Yeah.
Or even when you've studied something or whatever, and you don't recognize that the system involved around it or what makes it work is far beyond what you've ever considered.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
that's all of human knowledge. I mean, the part of my book that I'm writing about right now is I'm going, 17, 1800s, but Blackstone's law, right? In Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England, he talks about and he mentions the laws of nature like 27 times. I said, hey, Fritz, what are the laws of nature? And that's a legit question right now. Fritz, what are the laws of nature?
Birth and death, cycle of life, food, water, shelter, family, base principles of
Can you start talking about
sustainability.
Maslow, right?
Yeah, hierarchy of needs and what's this. When I think of sustainability of human life and quality,
Right.
I think of quality.
Yeah, okay. Which is totally fair in the modern age. So if you were reading Blackstone right now and you saw the laws of nature, you are concocting an image in your head about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and these laws adhere to the laws of nature, and that's why God has intended these laws to be, the supreme common law of everything, and it's either governed by the laws of nature, and our laws adhere to the laws of nature. You today, modernly, would read Blackstone very differently than they did when he wrote it. Because when he wrote it, the laws of nature at the time meant something very specific. It said everything has a nature inured to it by God. So a rock is always striving to adhere to this law. The rock is always striving, not consciously, but by its design is striving to be a rock. And raccoons are always striving to be raccoons. And trees are always striving to be trees. And grass is always striving to be grass. And humans are always striving to be humans. But because humans have an innate nature to them, inured by God, like commoners are always striving to be commoners. The elites are always striving to be elites. They have to do these things because that's the laws of nature dictate. Because upon our observation of things, by the most learned scientists of the time, we have all collectively determined that the laws of nature govern everything. And that's why slaves are slaves, because the laws of nature dictate it. And the laws of nature dictate that you're going to be a maidservant, and the laws of nature have dictated that you're going to be an attorney, and so you have to strive for that. And your natural family lineages, because they are governed by the laws of nature, will always strive for you to be an attorney family, and you'll always strive to be a commoner, and you'll always strive to be a slave, because that's what your nature dictates. Those are settled science laws. We don't even need to consider them.
Like, son, our family owns this mill. We've always milled. You are a miller.
Right. Not because you chose it, not because you didn't work hard enough. It's because the laws of nature dictate that that's what God has intended for you, in so many words, right? So that is the presumption that underpins modern law, that people to this day will read very differently than the origin of the law. The origin of the law said you have an innate ability. Now, today, the modern thing is you have free will and you make these choices, but all those things are rooted in the idea of the laws of nature. The laws of nature are not correct. Like they never were. There is no innate quality inured by God to make a rock a rock. There's no thing that says this thing is striving. And they would say things like, when things act outside of the laws of nature, that is some sort of evil has come into the thing. A horse rears up and does something weird, or kicks the kid in the head, or takes off, or something burns down when it's not supposed to burn down. Those are violations of the laws of nature, rather than the chaotic things that
seeing meaning in things versus
correct. And that's what it was about. It was about assigning meaning to things, but meaning that aligned with a religious perspective.
And that God has an opinion and a direction, and that things are the way they are because He made them that way, so that's the way they should be.
Right.
And that shouldn't leave those boundaries here and there.
Right.
That's what they are.
If it does, it's a violation of God's will, or God has willed something for this. But there is a meaning behind everything. A rock has a meaning, a tree has a meaning, a grass has a meaning, a commoner has a meaning, a king has a meaning, a prince has a meaning. Everything has a meaning to it that's assigned and governed by these laws of nature that don't exist. But that was the common understanding. So today our common understanding is a bunch of different things, like quantum mechanics and this and that and the other thing. if you had asked anybody what the laws of nature were back then, they would not have been able to explain in any great detail what the philosophers and the other thinkers of the time had created to make the laws of nature. They just assumed that that was correct because it sounded kind of like when they read the one paragraph about it, they went, oh yeah, that makes sense. That's it.
Well, people like structure in their world. Like, okay,
And
it makes
meaning and
sense. I can
everything
get
else.
my mind around
Right.
structure and hierarchy, and well, okay, this is my role. I'm done.
Correct. And the exact same thing is happening today with the exact same scientific processes that very vanishingly few people can put any voice to or any coherent understanding of. 80% of people think they're above average at figuring this stuff out. 100% of them are not. Because
I know how the world works.
Right.
How?
Because I've read
Because
something.
I heard something once, and now, well, that's what it is.
Right. Free will, free markets, capitalism, whatever. Or community, communism, tribalism. That's how the world... These are the new laws of nature. But they're no more valid or relevant to human interaction or human action than the old laws of nature that they understood in the 1800s. So 200 years from now, people are going to probably look back and go, those quaint little humans back then, they thought this.
Mm-hmm.
Except right now, we're in this weird transition period where no one's even questioning the words that are in Blackstone's writings that underpin the entire legal apparatus that governs most of Western Europe and the United States and most Western countries in general, and sort of radiates outwards to the rest of the countries by default. Constitutions and all this sort of stuff is all rooted in the same legal thinking that was predicated on the laws of nature that don't exist.
When about was that written? The Blackstone?
17, it was right before the War of Independence, I believe.
Okay.
But nevertheless, like Abraham Lincoln read Blackstone's. Right?
He was a lawyer, huh?
Yeah, well, he taught himself by
Yeah.
candlelight.
Candlelight, I know.
Yeah.
Amazing stories.
So, I mean...
I'm out of coffee. The pot's over there. You want some?
yeah, I could do with a splash, I guess. But the thing I'm getting at is our fundamental rule set is predicated on something that's demonstrably false. That's fine. Thank you. And those rules are going to be updated. But things like market economies and the way nations interact. Blackstone actually says in there, the laws of nature dictate that people must live in nations. We've established this. This is normal. But that it ignores the entirety of human history and every other experience besides the people that bought into the idea that these are the laws of nature, right? So when you shift that, or if you just take that presumption and then just fix one baseline rule set for it, you go, okay, well, look, I can recognize that these rules and ideas are set up incorrectly, and yet those are the rules we've all collectively agreed to operate on and create a world around. So if we just change that one base rule, it says, well, okay, let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that nation states are just going to be here for a while, because that's the system we built. And we built a huge apparatus that supports that idea. And we're going to operate from this idea that trade has to happen in a way where people have to pay a profit and have to pay a tax, and all these things just aren't going to magically vanish because that's the way the structure is created. And that's how human beings are accustomed to interacting. So what happens if we just make it so you can't cheat at the base layer? How does this game change at that point?
Or that your security or your freedom can't be messed with by a nation or a bank or whatever. It's like they can do all these things in a hierarchical, organized structure. No, this is the way, and you're like, actually, I'm free. In this realm, I am free. You can't mess with it.
Right. Well, I mean, and that traces back to the idea of like sovereignty, individual sovereignty, the American experiment, the idea of decentralized governance, and all that sort of stuff. If you can suddenly enforce all that in a meaningful way that doesn't rely upon a piece of paper, a guy with a gun, or some legislature, or some bicameral organization, or a president, or a king, or anybody else, nobody needs to enforce your rights because you have a baseline right to property, period. So if you take the Western tradition as the fundamental thing that drives us is property rights, because Blackstone talks about that a lot. This is the thing that separates us from the animals, basically. We have rights to private property. And that is the foundation of the Magna Carta and, our glorious system of governance that we have with the king and the Houses of Lords and the House of the Commons and yada, yada, yada. It's all predicated on this very core idea of sovereignty and property. But that's never been able to be enforced without coercive violence, ever, in the history of mankind. So we've taken this little core idea from, when they first started writing things down, and it sort of blossomed, and then you toss Christianity there and mix it around like a little ball of dough, and now we baked a neat little cookie sheet full of private property rights, individual rights, sovereign rights, yada yada yada. But except you've never really been able to enforce that unless you had a lot of guns or a lot of spears or a lot of soldiers, and that's all expensive and hard to do. Now you have this system where people can actually legitimately have private property rights that you cannot infringe upon, period. Like, there is no entity that can come along and tinker with that. So what does that do for things like voting? Or taxation? Or, representative government? Or how we pass rules or about taxation, or any number of things that can sort of start flowing from the idea of like, well, you cannot seize my property, regardless of what your paper says.
When you've got the mindset of more of like, no, I'm experiencing the world as more of a sovereign citizen, which has a bad characterization because of the legacy sort of type of sovereign citizenry that has evolved in a fiat world.
Yeah, correct.
Versus Bitcoin with just flat rules, fair rules, unbreakable rules. You could be a sovereign citizen in that regard, and so as a nation state or whatever's impose their hierarchy, and you're just kind of like, that doesn't have to affect me.
Right.
I'm not affected by that.
Not only does it not have to affect you, but it gives you voice to, like if Robert Kennedy's plan to get 4 million Bitcoin came to fruition, they said, hey, we have 20% of all Bitcoin that's ever going to be made.
There's not that much left to be mined.
It doesn't matter. There's plenty of Bitcoin for sale. There's
a funny quote. The president comes and says, the U.S. will own 21 million Bitcoin.
Trump says we're going to own 22 million.
That'd be an amazing speech.
Yeah. But, I mean, 4 million is absolutely an achievable goal, especially for someone like the United States. And it was Parman, the Bitcoin Whisperer or something like that. Parman's great. I love his content or her content. I don't know. I'm assuming it's a dude. Posted like, oh, this could never happen because there's not enough Bitcoin for sale. And I said, well, since the ETFs launched in the last 7 months, the ETFs have collectively bought about 1 million Bitcoin.
Yeah. It affected the price, but there are sellers at a certain price.
Well, it didn't affect the price because there are sellers at a price.
Yeah. Well, and apparently there's been a kind of a barrier of upward momentum, a ceiling at like 69,420.
Well, not even. I mean, the point is there are plenty of liquid Bitcoin holders that are in the tens of thousands of Bitcoin that are more than happy to part ways with their Bitcoin. They don't give a shit.
If they went to 1 million, there's going to be people like, okay, I'll sell some.
Right.
Or all
There's
of them.
always going to be a liquid seller somewhere. Mm-hmm. Always. So it's the price, until everyone becomes diamond hands, which they're, like if you're, I don't know, you're a legacy wealth holder whose family has had wealth for generations. And as a lark, you sometimes go down to the corner store and buy a Lamborghini, and then you crash it in Pole and don't give a shit. And then other weekends, you just take a helicopter ski vacation and all your friends with you, and you don't give a shit. And then other times, you just go buy like a floating yacht or rent that for a couple months so you can travel around the world and have a team of servants. And you don't even think about it.
You can afford it, yeah.
And then somewhere as a lark, you go, hey, I'm just going to go buy some Bitcoin because I just feel like fucking around and having 10,000 Bitcoin.
Sure.
And then a year later, I'm going to sell my 10,000 Bitcoin because I want to go get this thing instead. And, I mean, it's that consequential to you to think about moving Bitcoin in that long. Like,
sure.
I think about moving 10,000 Bitcoin, and I just go, oh my God, man. But there are a not insignificant number of very rich, very young people that don't give a shit about any of that stuff.
There's whales out there that are not exactly diamond hands, I think that's for sure.
100%.
Yeah.
And so the point I'm making, though, is like if the ETFs can accumulate nearly 1 million Bitcoin, that's on-chain metrics. This is known addresses that are on-chain that can say, yep, they got 900,000 Bitcoin. It's not in dispute. It's the beauty of Bitcoin is you can't, well, I got this much. No, you don't. That's right. You don't have that, right? Or you do.
Right.
So either your claim lines up or it doesn't, and it's verifiable by anybody that's got a copy of the blockchain. Can just look and go, yeah, they got that much. I can see it. Because this network of nodes tells me it's so. So if they can do it, then they're not the United States government that has unlimited printing power. And they also didn't start, except for Grayscale, they didn't start with $250,000 in the bank. Yeah, so sure, they could be moving that kind of size all over the place. Sooner or later, they're going to get to a place where there are fewer and fewer whales that are willing to part, and that it is going to start inching up, and it's going to start going up and up and up, and et cetera, et cetera. But in the meantime, there will always be somebody, there will always be a price where somebody somewhere will be willing to part with their Bitcoin.
Yep. Yeah, so it's an achievable goal.
Yeah.
And personally, I would love to see it. Nation states are going to want to get on board anyway. It's not like, no, it's a money of the people. We don't want nation states controlling or asserting power over it as if it could. I saw some commentary about, it not liking the idea of like, oh yeah, America's going to own a whole bunch. I'm like, it's not that anyone in the world still can't get their share. So why not a nation that I also want to succeed? If we believe in the ideals and the foundations, tattered as they've been, but we can still talk about those ideals, and if Bitcoin is integrated into the economy of it, it's better.
Perfect example. Absolutely spot on. I agree with you 100%. And that traces us all the way back to that conversation we sort of started off with. Milk. Well, we have regulations for a reason, because these guys did bad shit. And then that got more complicated, so these guys have to do bad shit. And then round you go. And that concentration of resources because of the regulations that are involved with it, but there's also that economic incentive, because by the time you get to a place, not only do you have to strip down your competition who are capable of adhering to the regulations, but you also strip down the amount of people, like just the burden of keeping up with monetary inflation and monetary debasement. So what I think will end up happening, and this is just my guess, is that you will still have centralized distribution and regulatory compliance over things, like big conglomerates or whatnot, but they will decentralize their operations to increase their quality. As in, it makes much more sense for, General Mills to go find a bunch of like independent tiny little corn producers that produce a very specialized, great sort of corn, than it is for them to run a factory farm that puts out this Monsanto shit, potentially, right?
Yeah.
And so it may very well be the type of thing where it reorients that incentive structure to say, hey, we can increase our regulatory compliance, decrease our reliance on continual cost cutting, and increase quality for consumers and everybody else, while also creating markets and structures to support that. Because it makes more sense to have a bunch of independent pork producers rather than have them all on the factory farm that we need to do, because that's how everything is sort of incentivized right now, so we can maintain regulations, maintain the certain quality levels, and yada yada yada. But that shift in that incentive structure is the thing that I keep hoping will happen.
Yeah, and even as I can imagine, that shift is going to take many years, and I'm less patient than the universe is generally, but that it, one, can be inevitable, but also just can reorient all the incentives. And it can start with large systems that have a big foot in the game, but it percolates down to every person who just sees it and hears it and, repeating what you hear and what's approved to believe. If it starts to shift at the top, and if nation states in America is in on it, everyone starts thinking about, what does that mean? What does that look like? Many people, current generations, will die never really understanding it.
Right.
It's just what it is. We're only people.
Yeah.
But as up-and-coming generations and people are really paying attention and thinking about it, start to hear it and repeat it and see it and notice the changes, it's going to cascade on itself in a way where things are just different now, and not everyone can even remember how that happened.
Right. Yeah.
And for us to say it was Bitcoin, it's like it could still be kind of like, oh, okay, well, but historians may look at it and say, I'm just imagining 100 years from now, and historians saying Bitcoin changed the world.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it started this way and that way, and as it crept, that was
the Genesis. The Genesis block.
The Genesis block.
Yeah.
So I think historians will see it differently, and
certainly.
So as futurists, when we talk about it, that we're still so fringe in the mainstream, but man, it's starting to become less fringe. It's less. It's not fringe anymore. It's not fringe.
It's fully mainstream.
We have presidential candidates that have to talk about it.
Right.
And in fact, as they talk about it and get orange pilled, like RFK Jr., I truly believe they believe in it now.
Right.
And Trump may not believe it
yet,
but he could and will maybe.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, once you go down the rabbit hole, everyone knows it leads to some pretty deep, dark places, and kind of deep, shining places. But I mean, if you just look at the world that we created here in the United States based on a bunch of debt, like running up our credit card too much, we built some pretty incredible shit. Like houses are pretty comfortable, our air conditioning is pretty comfortable. Not everyone got it equally, but just that debt-driven society that we've created and being able to offload inflation and all that kind of shit. This is all kind of cool in the history of mankind. We have heavier in air flight. We have, escape velocity launch vehicles. We've been on another structure in outer space, the moon. We may be going to Mars. I don't hold a lot of hope for that. I mean, we've been on Mars. We've got a helicopter sitting up there floating around. We're flying drones on Mars. That's not nothing. Mm-hmm. We've got a thing that's left the solar system. So, like, a lot of cool shit has come out of this. Like, a lot of really amazing human advancement has come along. Our ability to deal with trauma and injuries and things like that is exponentially better than it's ever been in the history of man.
I think we're addressing psychology in better ways nowadays. We're more informed about...
Potentially. I mean, that's pretty soft. I think it's about as soft as our ability to deal with disease, which I think is very... I think a lot of that... But I think a lot of that is born from Fiat food, right? And Fiat exercise and Fiat. So,
at least we're on the path. I mean, we're starting.
Well, but that's what I'm getting at. Is like if you have something where you can continue running up your credit card and kind of coming up and exploring different ways to solve problems, but you're not worried about the credit card bill overwhelming your ability to pay it, because that's where we're at right now. Mm-hmm. We have 500 trillion or 500 billion, I think, half a trillion in an actual hard asset, gold. Theoretically, no one's seen it in 20 years, who knows. But to cover a $35 trillion debt, that's never going to get fixed. You cannot fix that problem.
Can we ever pay it off? The majority of our taxes paying off the interest.
Well, but that's what I'm getting at, is like if you can put Bitcoin on that balance sheet, it does the same thing for the country as it did for MicroStrategy. Mm-hmm. As well, we got this continual debt problem. Well, now we have a continual asset growing problem, right? Mm-hmm. So it ends up balancing those books. My point being is if someone gave you a credit card and said, here, hold Bitcoin, you can use both. Mm-hmm. This asset is going to back whatever you put on the credit card, and you can run a 10% deficit every year on your credit card. Mm-hmm. How great would your life be in 10 years? Like, you'd be able to acquire all kinds of new shit. You could try different things. You could try, I'm going to try and start a little business. I'll just put it on the credit card. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, you know that your reserve asset is growing, so your asset to reserve ratio is never getting so skewed that it's impossible to pay back. You're never going to be bankrupt, not because you're not running up more debt. It's because you have something that's growing with your debt, right?
Yeah. It makes me think of Saylor's talk that he did yesterday.
Right.
Did you see that at all?
I've seen clips.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Not to go on a tangent or finish your point. I watched all of Saylor's talk, and I watched part of it a second time because Saylor just continues to amaze me, because there's a lot that I'm like, okay, yeah, I've heard that before. I've heard this before. And over the years, it's like, no, I get it. I like hearing it, and he's a great communicator.
Yeah.
He went into some new territory in his talk yesterday. Not that it blew my mind, but it just reframed certain things in new ways where I'm just like, oh my gosh, he continues to push the envelope on getting real with what this is, folks.
Right.
So he went through the assets through 20th century time and what we, everything from, you can hold a melting ice cube, you can go to the peso, you can go to a better fiat currency, you can go to gold, you can go to land and property, and they all melt. They all melt in their own way, or can be affected by property taxes or control or physical seizures and stuff like that. And then you have Bitcoin, which is, you're looking at, instead of melting in, a few years or 10 years or 50 years or 100 years maybe, now you have 10,000 years,
right,
depending on how you hold it or what you're doing with it, if you're living off it. And it just changes the game so fundamentally. And then so from the commodity or fiat holding concepts of people want to hold stuff and things that they don't lose out on traction about. Into as a person living in this world, and we now have Bitcoin, he got into the normies, the maxis, the double maxis, the triple maxis. Right. And so it's funny because I used to just think of it like, okay, you got your fiat normies and you got your Bitcoin curious, and then you have your maxis. Right. Beyond the maxi, I'd considered myself a maxi. In his frame, I'm really kind of a Bitcoin normie. I'm really just a normie who DCAs. Right. That for him, that's the Bitcoin. Just you're a normie. Right. It's not bad, but
yeah, the people that take on debt are the ones that are the maxis.
Yeah, so he's talking about like what he did with MicroStrategy, right. like a triple maxi.
Right, he issues debt to get Bitcoin.
Exactly, and so like basically you're way to have skin in the game where you don't way over leverage to do it. You're not doing these crazy, week long hard leverage trades. But say you took out a 10 or a 30-year second mortgage or a good loan that has interest, and you're going to pay interest on that loan. Right. But you use that
to buy Bitcoin
for Bitcoin, right. Which washes that out, like you talked about with the credit card.
Well, but that's what I'm getting at with the credit card is like, and it's a little different than what he's saying. Is he's saying stack, right? Mm-hmm. I'm saying if you're a government, the idea of an elastic money supply keeps showing up throughout history for a reason, because there's always some need for more than you have. You need to be able to issue extra so you can pay to get over a hump. Mm-hmm. And right now, they issue debt, they keep trying to get over the hump, and they keep compiling their debt, but they don't have a reserve asset that's growing with it. Mm-hmm. What my suggestion here is that you can continue to debase and you can continue to grow. You never end up with such an imbalance that you can keep the illusion going for a while. But growing things through debt has given us all of this. So if you could find a way to tweak that rule set so you are able to still have an elastic money and you have something that's growing with that elastic money, mm-hmm. then the imbalance becomes less acute.
Yep. So yeah, it got me to thinking about the massacre at Swan that happened recently, and not to disparage anything about it.
What got you thinking about the massacre at Swan?
How many people
got Saylor's talk?
So thinking about the huge potential and growth and ability of Bitcoin, and having like we talked about, the growth balanced with the so you have your credit card type growth backed by Bitcoin that
is inflating with the debt.
Yeah. Miners are under a lot of pressure when the price crab walks for 6 months.
Are they?
Well, so they're trying to grow, but if all their holdings are Bitcoin, it's hard to grow and use, say, fiat to do that when maybe your reserves of Bitcoin have to be sold to do that. Mm-hmm. I don't know how else they're doing it, but as far as their revenue models and stuff, yes, they're mining Bitcoin, they're getting Bitcoin, but they're not making cash separately. They're relying on the Bitcoin. Wow. Anyway, so yeah, Swan, man, I don't know how many people they laid off, but it was all of that I can tell, tons of people I follow, their promotion and outreach and onboarding folks, readjusting for business that I don't know entirely why that all happened, other than
bean counters, dude.
Money,
it's always liquid
cash.
Yeah,
it has to boil down to stock and flow, I suppose, and their flows was hard. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just bean counters get a hold of stuff. I don't know what their objective was to bring all those people on board. I don't know what sort of profit incentive they had, what sort of long-term vision they had, or if they just wanted to get the Swan name out there and then they were planning on getting them the whole time. I don't know.
I can't imagine. I think that they may have considered that with the ETFs and that the price would have not crab walked the way it did for so long, and they were relying on a higher price, and ultimately we're going to have to be selling Bitcoin, and they, you're not going to dip into the holdings they have, but they had some holdings themselves starting to mine, yes, starting to mine their own Bitcoin, but that's just still new.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Is like I can't really, as I look at the business model of Swan, they are Bitcoin custodian, and they're running a mining operation, right? So if you look at those two, I think it would be, like when they started that hiring push, I don't even know it was a foregone conclusion ETFs were going to happen, right? I mean, that was only 7 months ago. So, like, to make a business case where you're going to devote that much capital to something that is not even a regulatory certainty may have seemed likely, but that would represent a huge gamble to me. If I were CEO or whatever, looking at that, I'd go, I don't, are we just going to risk it all on this thing and just burn through cash reserves to hopefully be able to support this thing that I'm not really clear what purpose those things serve. Like, I thought it was neat to watch the media stuff. I thought their shows were fun.
Oh, they had great presence, and I hate to see that go away.
Well, that's what I was getting at. Is there's clearly no revenue model for having YouTube videos up, right? There's clearly no revenue model for having Twitter videos up. So if I just trace it back, and not knowing anything about the internal operations at Swan, I kind of look at it and go, okay, well, there is this thing that says, hey, we're trying to grow our business, and we're trying to get attention for our business. So let's just, as a short-term thing for the next year, let's just spam media stuff so we are a household name.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if some revenue comes in to support them, great. If not, we'll just dump them.
It's just crazy as a business decision to the heads of those media divisions. I mean, Dante, head of business,
Swan Business.
Head of Swan Business. Everything from, Dante and all these other folks with a presence and then legitimately jobs I'd see posted on there. Bitcoinerjobs.com. There were like CFOs and heads of revenue and accountants and all these, I would say, core money-related positions that were posted, all gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just their PR and stuff. I feel like the cuts were so high and so deep and expansive in that what I was seeing, that it wasn't like, oh, we had a plan, we saw it coming, we had to contract. It was like, oh shit, we found something out. We did some math and looking at it. We have to do all this really hard, real quick, right now. And it was a reaction to something happened. I don't know.
I mean, that's possible, I suppose.
And it was so unexpected. It wasn't sort of like, oh, we're going to contract here and back off here. It was just like, boom, hatchet all of this area completely away.
Right. Well, I mean, perhaps there was some sort of anticipated revenue stream that fell apart. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing, is like a lot of those things were media arms. I saw. Well, I mean, that was the most public thing I saw. Like, in terms of not hiring for new positions, you can kind of, and the only cuts I'm aware of were the people that posted about it on Twitter, right? But I don't look at their corporate governance structure. It's just a company I buy Bitcoin with, so I'm sort of like, okay. I mean, I like what they do. I like Corey's vision for things. I think, and I like their political stance and their stance on things.
Yeah,
I'm still looking forward to Pacific Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. I hope that's still going.
I know, that's the thing, because there were people who were cut. I'm like, they're the ones that were helping put that together, or we're going to run it. I don't know. I mean, who's doing that job now? I'm curious, but I totally love Swan. I think they'll probably be fine. And are there, you got to reconsolidate as a business. You got to make hard decisions to survive and focus on what works. And if something's not working, you got to make hard decisions.
Yeah, you got to fix it.
But they were so big and high and wide, and then I'd see people on Twitter, and I'd check them on, some of them I see on LinkedIn, where we're in the network, and I'd look at them, I'd see them commenting or posting for other coworkers at Swan, and I was seeing more and more and more people in their world. I don't know what proportion of their business of people got cut or whatnot, but the more I started looking, the more I just saw, wow, how many people were all in this whole, I mean, from the top down, it looked like this whole division is gone.
Yeah.
Without any more information, and they're not going public, and they're reorienting their mining.
Oh, were they going to go public? Were they going to do an IPO?
Swan was going to do an IPO.
Oh, well, the
they had a
IPO
plan.
probably fell through.
So the IPO fell through.
Oh, well, there you go. That's the whole thing. IPO. Oh, no IPO? Okay, you're all fired. I mean, that makes it real simple. I didn't realize they had an IPO.
But why? How not IPO? I don't know.
Because those things get tripped up in all kinds of shit. There may not be demand in the market. They may have seen, like, oh, our share price is going to be way lower than we thought. We're not going to raise the kind of capital we thought we were going to. I mean, there's a million things that go wrong with an IPO. And it's an enormously complex, expensive process to go through. So if they got to some level in it where the attorneys and the bean counters are going, this ain't going to work out the way you thought, then just go, oh, okay, well, shut it down. You know, I mean, that's it. So that makes the most sense of anything I've heard so far.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's sort of the risks of business. If you're thinking, hey, IPO, and then it just blows up in your face. Like if Tesla, way back in the day, if they said, hey, your IPO, it's going to do shit, buddy, he would have shut it down. He would have laid a bunch of people off. He probably would have gone bankrupt. So,
yeah, I guess that's what I have so much, seeing so much great just presence of Swan. It's like, how would the IPO not work? I don't understand these things. But I thought, man, of all the IPOs to have out there, Swan could and should do that. Like Master, MicroStrategies. Man.
Yeah, but MicroStrategy has an ongoing enterprise software business.
Yeah.
So, and they were IPO'd 25 years ago. I mean, and depending on what they did with their little .com bubble bump that they got back then, like who knows how they might have just been squirreling cash and using that to fund their operations for the last 20 years. I don't know, because that stock ran up huge back in 2000. And I still don't think it's recovered its share price from that time. So say what you will about any of this stuff, but I mean, if I just look at Swan, I go, why would you go public with that company anyway? Like, it doesn't look like a publicly traded company to me, unless you're trying to compete with Marathon and Riot and all those other people. And if you can't quite get that mining scaled up to that level, then running that public doesn't make any sense at all. I mean,
my thought was that someday Swan can be a big mining presence. They could and should have, buy a bank, be a broader financial services all around Bitcoin. Maybe there was banking regulation stuff about trying to do more in the banking sector, and like, no, you're not going to get a banking license. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, if it truly was an IPO thing, like, I mean, that makes a lot of sense for the gamble. It also makes a lot of sense for the media presence. Like, if you're gearing up for an IPO and you want to get that name out there. But if they're not getting traction with it, I mean, if it's a bunch of Bitcoin maxis that love the videos, they're not the people that they're trying to appeal to their stock, right? Like, they're trying to appeal to Wall Street people. And if it's just not getting the traction they wanted, then yeah, I mean,
it's just unfortunate because down the road, I just see them being successful and being there, and this is like step back. We're not right now, but I don't know what the plan is. And it's like, oh, well, it just sucks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It didn't really affect me. Like,
sure.
Like, I just kind of went, well, it's just another company that tried something that didn't work. But that's normal. Like, that's just corporate America, and it's tough. I mean, it's a shark infested tank, and but there's, like I said, even without having the right projections in place, like just whatever assumptions they make going into it, heaven only knows what can blow that up, and just regulatory uncertainty, stiffer competition, increases in electrical costs, construction underruns, inability to procure goods. I mean, all kinds of things can trip that process up. But it, as you said it now, it sort of makes a lot more sense intuitively. I still don't have any insight into what actually happened. But if I was just going to intuit my way through the problem, I'd say, okay, well, we're planning on an IPO. We're going to expand this mining business. It's going to do XYZ for us. We're going to take that public. That's going to give us XYZ capital reserves to do XYZ thing. In order to promote that, we're going to get this media wing going. We're going to get a lot of information out there, get a lot of stuff going, yada, yada, yada. And then step 3 fell apart, and I went, oh, shit. Oh, well, fuck. Okay. God damn it. We thought this was going to work. Is there any way to salvage it? No. Well, fucking cut it, because otherwise we're going to be burning so much cash over the next 6 months, we're going to go out of business. So,
well, that's the thing is the margin so thin there that it was such an emergency. Because in my mind, look, the timing was harsh in the sense that it was right before the Bitcoin conference. Trump going to speak there. Could you hold out till Pacific Bitcoin? Could you hold out till the election? Those would be signals or indicators for me on momentum building. We're like, maybe I keep thinking this, but we're on the cusp of this narrative shift and this awareness and potential. But they made these cuts before these things were coming that were huge potential.
Well, I mean, that's so grossly speculative.
Sure.
You know, like you can't speculate on what public perception might be after that. You know, like you know, any decision making they're coming at has got to be coming from numbers, right?
It's got to be boiled down to money.
Right. So they can't rely on like, well, Trump's going to be speaking at the Bitcoin conference. Like that's pretty neat for people to talk about on Twitter. But if you're an accountant and an attorney, like that is meaningless signal for anybody.
Yeah.
Like it's fun for us to sit here and bullshit about like how many Trump supporters are going to go buy Bitcoin now, but you know, for someone to hinge an IPO on that, that's like no.
Yeah.
You know.
And every week you can say, well, if we just hold out another month, we should be good. Well, what about now? A month later. Well, if we just hold out another month,
Right.
you know, things are coming. And then how long can you keep doing that? Like,
Well, you can't. I mean,
when moon?
Well, that's precisely it. I mean, like people that are operating on a salary, and you know, they can entertain thoughts like that. But if you're running I mean, you have obligations to all kinds of people at that point, and shareholders and debt holders and lien holders and all kinds of stuff. And I mean, it can just be external. Someone else can come along and go, hey, we're not going to support this shit anymore. Fix it now.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to pull your funding. And they go, okay, we'll fix it. I mean, they don't, you know, it's not, you know, I don't think the sort of timing around cultural events is necessarily factoring so much into what they're thinking rather than just like, you know, there's hard realities that they're dealing with and they're complex. And,
Well, my mind goes into emergency reaction to a harsh response where on, I want to say like on a Wednesday or a Thursday or a Friday, their folks are putting out news and it's the same old, just everybody's just going on a trajectory. We're doing this. Nothing's changed. Things are good. Monday, well, I was just informed I was cut and it came as a total shock and surprise across the board.
Yeah.
2-week severance, hard and fast.
Yeah.
And that I would guess none of these people had any clue about anything. So it's just, wow, that leap from, well, there was a meeting with some money folks and IPO stuff, and right now,
Yeah.
it's happened from a Friday to a Monday, we're doing this now, and shock. So
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if it's an emergency. Like that would imply that they didn't have any foresight into anything that they were doing. Which I mean, that places them squarely in the realm of like the grossly incompetent, which I don't think they are. You know,
I don't think so. I think the optics are just the optics are harsh. It wasn't kind of like we're backing off. It was like,
well, you
whack.
can't back off. You have to be full throttle, right? If you're going into an IPO, there's no like waffling on your way to the IPO. You know, like you can't waffle your way into it. You can't waffle your way back out.
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing this. It's not going to work. Stop. That's it. It's kind of like going into battle. You don't waffle your way into battle. You know, they didn't waffle their way into D-Day and then waffle their way back out when it didn't quite work out the way they thought.
Sure.
I mean, once they go, they're going, and if it's not working, they have to stop immediately, or else you end up with, you know, just catastrophic casualties. And so they know that going into it, but I'm sure the Swan people that are sophisticated enough to recognize, like, all right, this is what we're doing. But it's like a pilot taking off. They don't just willy-nilly take off. They say, okay, at this distance on the runway, this is going to happen. At this distance, this is going to happen. At this distance, we have to do this or have to do this. That's our decision point. And once we cross that, depending on what conditions we're flying, we keep flying. If something goes wrong, we're putting it back on the ground. Period.
Yeah.
And so they cross their thresholds, and they hit that threshold 3. And whatever event triggered it, they said, okay, it's either go or no go, and they hit the no go, and they went, okay, pull the fucking plug, we're done.
Yeah, well, and their own employees had no clear view on.
Well, you can't tell your employees that
Yeah.
when you're going in IPO land, because
Sure.
one leak and the whole thing blows up before you even have a chance to get to the threshold,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
So
it's harsh.
yeah, I mean, I feel bad for the people that got wrecked by it.
Well, and a lot of them are going to be fine too. They're networking in Nashville right now, and
Yeah,
I've already heard of
totally.
guys saying, "Hey, I'm working for them now," and I mean, they're capable people, but
Yeah. Well, a lot of them might just have to go back to a Fiat job. I don't know, but
mhm.
the thing is, if you're working for a publicly traded or soon to be publicly traded company, you have to, unless you are also just another person just kind of bipping along and hoping for the best. Like
Mhm.
you have to be looking at that and going, oh, these guys are about to go public. This could absolutely fuck me. Like,
Yeah.
I need to be real careful about my options. But,
yeah. When I had left Microsoft and gone to work for a startup for a couple of years, and I was like employee number 15 when we started, and we grew to like 50 or 60 people at one point. And at one point, I mean, it was .com era, 2001, 2002 timeframe, and it was just the .com thing was starting to dry up and become apparent. There's a lot of just bullshit, and but what we were doing was legit. It's just that the money was clearly drying up.
Right.
And we went from ideas of VC stuff and IPO hopes and dreams to, well, this doesn't look like it's happening. It keeps not happening, or
Right.
it happens a little but not enough. And so I saw the growth and expansion occur, and I started seeing people hired, doing jobs, looking busy and doing stuff. And some people I didn't know what the hell they did,
Right.
but we were looking like we're doing stuff, and we were doing stuff, and there were other areas where we were looking like we were doing stuff. And what I experienced in that startup time frame was quick, large growth, kind of a stable flattening and sitting and still going to conventions and conferences and selling. And then we cut 10 people here, and then we cut another 10 people there. And then the writing was on the wall. So what my experience was, the writing's kind of on the wall. Some people started to drop off themselves. All of that was FUD internally and was bad for morale. And it was kind of like, oh, God, what's going on? And then it got down to we're down to like 30 employees now. And then my time came up because we weren't doing what we thought we were going to be doing.
Yeah.
And I got terminated, let off, and it was like I could kind of see it coming. And then when it happened, it was disappointing and kind of a surprise, but also like, well, and they went away. They're gone. Mm-hmm. But for me, it felt like the employees had a sense of what was going on. For Swan, it was like, wow, nobody has any idea.
Well, yeah. I mean, but it's a night and day scenario. You know, I mean, the scenario you're talking about was being in a going concern that is growing, and then they're hitting that go no go place, and they're trying. You know, but they have runway. Like they have all kinds of runway because they. You know, but then it's like the C-suite is trying to figure out like which we're going to keep, which we're going to cut.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if we just trim a little? Can we keep this thing going because it might still work? And it's a very different decision-making process than we're about to go public. Like going public is, and those things fail all the time. I mean, it's not unusual for an IPO to fail. But the same thing that happened to Swan, it happens to every other place that fails their IPO.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just go, okay, cut fucking everything, and let's see what business we have left.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they are a going concern. They do have some business model. They're pressing ahead with their mining operation somehow.
Yeah, they haven't stopped that. I think the initial announcement Corey made involved talk about mining, and then he clarified, we're still mining. That team is still doing that. We've changed. I mean, I couldn't decipher the aspects of the mining they're doing in certain holdings here and there. They reframed the nature of their mining, but they're still mining,
right,
which is good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and I hope, I expect down the road that Swan can reemerge and get back to it, and would like to. They want to be in the culture of it all, right, of course, as well. But
well, I mean, I think that I would still kind of cling to the idea without knowing anything. Like I said, just intuitively, it makes a lot of sense to me. If you're going for an IPO, you want to start increasing your cultural awareness around Swan. Right? Mm-hmm. But if your IPO blows up, then like River doesn't give a shit about any of this stuff. They're not producing content. Unchained sort of sponsors people here and there, but they're certainly not going all in on this media campaign and trying to start a media company. And maybe there was some segment within Swan that said, "Hey, in addition to our mining operation, we're going to start a media company. It's going to make X amount of dollars after X amount of time." And then they looked at the numbers and went, "Oh, we're spending $50,000 a month to support our media operations, and we're generating $1,000 a month of revenue. So yeah, that's not good. We're done."
Yeah, I had thought and hoped maybe whether it was just YouTube or other things that there'd be revenue, sustainable media business there.
No, there isn't though. I mean, there's zero. Like they did, I saw 0 ads running on any of their stuff, and it's all ad supported.
Yeah.
So if they don't have some sort of, so it's clearly stuff that Swan's doing to increase their, or at least it looks to me like they were, because they know for a fact there's zero chance Swan went into it thinking, hey, we're going to make up for this with ad revenue from fucking YouTube, like,
Yeah.
because that does not exist. That is a fraction of the cost of creating content on YouTube.
To the scale they're doing it, yeah.
Well, to the scale anybody does it. Like, even those YouTube, the people that get really big on YouTube, there's a reason they're sitting there shilling fucking every goddamn, like, there's a reason Breedlove is up there shilling fucking dick pills and whatever the hell else he puts at the beginning of his shows.
Mm-hmm.
It's because that's how he pays the bills.
They're getting their sponsorships, and what is Swan going to sponsor themselves?
Right, exactly. So that's a snake eating its own tail.
Yeah.
So there has to be a different reason other than we're trying to grow a media arm.
Mm-hmm.
I was impressed. I kept saying, like, hey, this media arm is amazing. But I was always sort of like, what is the end goal of your media arm? Like, I don't get it, because
my thought was
unless you're making Bitcoin TV. Well, onboarding, I mean, like
marketing, brand, their biggest brand.
Well, that's it. That's precisely it. They're branding for the IPO, and
Mm-hmm.
if the IPO is not happening, there's no point in building your brand anymore. You're sticking with what you got and what people know already. So I don't know. I mean, like I said, it sucks for the people who got laid off, but I mean, I think Swan's fine. We'll see.
Swan surely will be fine at the fundamental business level. What I loved about Swan, not knowing anything else about it, was that you got your River, you got your Unchained, you got your Strike. They all have their brand. Swan had all that. And this media wing that was like, when Moon happens and all that, or whatever, they're just sort of primed to be like this visible brand for everyone to say, oh, yeah, use Microsoft,
right.
Sort of thing.
Yeah. But Microsoft didn't brand themselves that way either, right?
Yeah, or Apple, or I don't know. It's just sort of like, when you think of like, hey, you want to get a computer, who do you think of?
Dell.
Why? I mean, yeah, why? Well, it's the media and the promotion and the culture or the brand and the marketing of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing, is the Microsoft was branded by Enterprise Software, and Apple was branded by sort of retail hardware, but that their user base came first. It wasn't like they went out advertising and stuff.
Yeah, just that idea that, I mean, so call it a soda pop company. It's like, why would you buy that sugar water than that sugar water? It's so much about the shape of the bottle, the color of the label, the marketing. Hey, buy our sugared water. Why? Because when you go to buy it, that's what you think of, Coca-Cola. Oh, okay.
Well, that's also brand awareness after you have an established brand, right? Like,
yeah.
That's just continuing brand awareness.
Well, and Bitcoin being so new, you just want to get in there with like the brand, say, the best brand.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, like I said, I can see it all in support of an IPO and trying to get that IPO. Like, I imagine, had the IPO been successful, then those media wings would have been trimmed to sustainability with the IPO in place.
Or they'd be such a small cost to your business when you're so successful that, keep doing it.
Yeah, potentially. But there are very few bean counters and lawyers on the planet that like to lose money on anything.
Sure.
Like, everything needs to be profitable, or we shouldn't be doing it. And, if that is set up where it's like, oh, this isn't profitable, then that's just where it's going, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, if they just set it up as like trying to pump the IPO and getting that, getting this media push, this media blitz, it was probably cheaper to have in-house media people just talking about Bitcoin all the time than it was to go and advertise in a traditional manner to try and shill your IPO. And you can't even really shill an IPO that way anyway, because it's against the law.
Yeah, that's the thing. No mention of IPO ever stated, or even when I would inquire with people I know about it, it'd be like,
we don't talk about it.
Not talked about.
Well, you can't. It's against
the
law.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's promoting, and you're not allowed to promote.
Yeah.
Unless they're accredited investors. So it's like a backdoor way to kind of. I mean, it's actually a pretty genius strategy because it can bring a lot of that awareness and bring investor attention to your IPO without talking about your IPO.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be done under the guise of like, hey, we're here to promote Bitcoin through media. But again, once the IPO goes away, there's 0 point. Just like River does not engage in a media arm, and Unchained does not engage in media because they're not going for an IPO and they're not trying to promote the brand. So it makes sense. It sort of clears a lot of that up, at least in terms of my mind. But
yeah, I hate to see it, but business realities as they are, I hugely love and respect Swan. I just know their integrity is always there.
Yeah.
One of the early making it clear, shitting on shitcoins, making it clear the integrity of money and being Bitcoin maxis to the core.
Yeah.
So
No, I mean, I devoted exactly 30 seconds to thinking about what happened to Swan. And I go, oh, that sucks. All right, I'll let her, moving on.
Other than that, like watching Dante cook whenever I could, or Sam Callahan and others, and it's like, I don't know. Now Dante's doing his own thing,
Right.
And that may evolve, but it's not the same. It's not Swan's daily update.
Yeah.
The signal. Hey, where's my signal?
Yeah.
Because I trusted that. It was like a compass for me. Oh, I'll hear about stuff, whatever, and then Dante would lay things out, and I'd be like, okay, as an NPC, I'm gonna repeat that I just heard, but it's the best signal I can have.
Well, actually, as I reflect on it now, I go, hey, man, well, there's a huge opportunity right now to provide something. I'll just go rip off Dante Cook's format and just start putting out Bitcoin Daily.
This channel is going to blow up because, so that's another thing. So one of the couple of hugest podcasts, What Bitcoin Did.
Oh yeah, just went away.
It's in, I want to say August or September, but they're saying we're going to be done.
Right, TFTC is going away.
TFTC, their rabbit hole recap, they're moving on.
Yeah.
Now they have their big media wings that they're focusing on. For them, the podcast just isn't necessary because there's so much more now.
Right.
Peter McCormack is, he's going to run for mayor of Bedford. I think.
Right. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think he is. Anyway, but so they're moving on. They're successful. Like we were talking with Travis, our buddy that I talked to about in the third person in his face. He mentioned on one of our podcasts. He just said there's we need more good Bitcoin podcasts out there.
Yeah.
And if some of the big ones,
good one.
this is the best one I've ever heard of.
Two fucking Gen X fucking dipshits just smattering about
Bullshit about
bullshit.
Gender identity. Hey, what's going on with gender identity lately? We cover the gamut, but it's big picture, all encompassing.
Broad spectrum.
The core of it's Bitcoin and what Bitcoin does. I think there's a hunger for it as Bitcoin grows and becomes a narrative more mainstream. I just think there's a hunger for it and it'll grow. And if the big guys move on and not that they're stepping aside, but they make room for this format, I mean, people want to see it. So
well, nobody wants to see it yet.
Actually, nobody wants to see it. But
well, no, what was the views last time? Like 40.
I'll have to double check.
Yeah.
Some of our shows get hundreds of views.
We're in the hundreds, man.
We're in the hundreds.
And blowing up.
We are.
Well, I mean, what episode are we on now? Is this 15?
15, 16? Yeah.
Well, I've been saying there's someone, I think it was Robin Sayer said, like, if you can just get past 21 episodes, you've done more than like 99% of podcasts. So I've got number 21 stuck in my brain. Like, I've been pricing like Shure microphones because I think they look kind of cool. And they sound way better because we sound like shit on these things.
It's hit and miss, but it's often mediocre.
Yeah. Our sound quality is pretty terrible. The backdrop is pretty dope.
Yeah.
I mean, we got free use of a kind of a cool space.
Yeah.
And the Bitcoin spongy thing has been with us for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think pretty soon we can just clamp some microphones here, and then
we'll have the boom mics.
And then we can start talking like moving our microphones around and maybe get some, I don't know, something.
Hey, microphone company, if you want to sponsor a show that uses your microphones, and we'll mention that, we need a couple microphones.
Yeah, we could use a couple of mics.
So these little.
Anybody that got to the 2-hour and 5-minute mark, including a brief bathroom break, is probably going to get edited out.
If they listen this far, they're pretty much just going to give us a sponsorship.
Yeah, 100%. So, and Tesla, hey Elon, this dude
owns
we're
a funding
Cybertruck.
Yeah.
So we can just have the Cybertruck floating through the screen every day.
I'll put your logo on the side of my Bitcoin truck.
Yeah.
And I'll orange peel every day as I DoorDash.
Yeah. I still think it looks like a Pontiac Aztec, but that's just me.
All it needs is the tent hanging off the back of it.
Exactly.
Put the tent up and drive around with your whatever that is, the Mad Max camp out.
Yeah. I'm making a Mad Max Prius, so.
Yeah.
Lifted.
I
got my lift kit put on my Prius.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty excited about that. Most people can't tell because it's only like an 1.5-inch lift. But I put some black wheels on it. Chrome lug nuts. But I'm going to put like a roof rack and some KC light bars in the front and a skid plate and then some big knobby tires on it. It's going to be Mad Max Prius.
Yeah.
Exciting times.
Yeah.
I still can't get the goddamn check engine light to go off though. So. I've been replacing little sensors and all kinds of shit over and over and over. I replaced a catalytic converter. I don't know how to get this goddamn thing shut off, but I'm gonna fix a freaking check engine light. I'm gonna
just
probably
put some black tape over it, you know.
Well, I have the little OBD reader, so I just keep resetting it and hoping it'll go away on its own. It doesn't. I've replaced all the shit, all the common stuff that YouTube told me to replace, to the tune of about $800 now, worth of sensors and catalytic converters and shit. Still there. So the next step is new plugs and coils, and then if that doesn't work, the worst possible outcome is a ECU, but there's a spacer I can put on one of the sensors to maybe trick it. We'll see.
If it's not blinking, it's, you know, who knows why those go
I don't
up.
know. I just don't like lights on my dashboard. It makes me feel like a hillbilly. So
Right.
yeah,
My old Suzuki that I still keep for
it's nothing but lights, I'm sure.
the check engine light has been on for years.
Yeah.
It drives.
Just fine.
I know when it rattles, and I fix that, but
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right.
good episode, good talk. We'll do it next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Al. Thanks.
All 100 of you.